That order is being challenged by Russia's illegal and unprovoked attack on the sovereign nation of Ukraine. Ukraine Defense Contact Group has stood together in the face of this Russian aggression. And we will continue to stand together to support Ukraine and defend the international order. Once again, I want to thank Secretary Austin for his leadership in this international coalition of more than 50 nations in support of Ukraine. Thanks also to Defense Minister Umerov and the Ukrainian delegation who joined us today, and for their leadership of Ukraine's armed forces. And to all the nations attending today, thank you for your continued support of Ukraine. Ukrainian forces are being challenged, particularly in the Kyiv region, where they are valiantly defending against increased Russian attacks. In recent days, Russia launched a new offensive attack against Kyiv, aiming to establish a shallow buffer zone along the Ukrainian border. Russia anticipates that this will divert Ukrainian focus and capabilities from other critical areas. Ukraine has made concerted efforts to build and strengthen defensive lines, which are being tested by Russian attacks. And Ukraine is expanding air defense munitions to protect their skies as they defend against continued Russian strikes on critical civilian infrastructure. Ukrainian forces are fighting hard to hold against Russian advances across the front lines. Ukraine's reserves and stockpiles are being challenged as they defend against Russian offensive actions, which underscores the urgency of this coalition's work to sustain Ukraine. The President authorized a $1 billion military aid package for Ukraine following the passage of the National Security Supplemental. And the second aid package was authorized a little over a week ago to send additional critical capabilities to Ukraine. These packages include urgently needed weapons, such as artillery ammunition, air defense interceptors, anti-aircraft missiles, armored vehicles, javelins, and other anti-armor systems. We have worked diligently to deliver these supplies as quickly as possible. The influx of U.S. and coalition assistance will enable Ukraine to continue to withstand Russian aggression. The military aid to Ukraine sends a clear message to the world. This coalition will not tire. We will not waver. We will not give up. Our collective resolve is steadfast. We know that we cannot allow Russia to rewrite borders, to force tyranny on an unwilling people, and to supplant a sovereign democratic nation. The actions of this coalition show other would-be aggressors that we will defend the international order together. Our support for Ukraine is not merely an act of solidarity. It is a strategic necessity that reinforces broader international security. If unchecked, Russian aggression could embolden other authoritarian regimes to challenge international norms and violate the sovereignty of their neighbors. This highlights the importance of a robust and unified response. Global events have far-reaching consequences that impact us all. Our collective actions today will shape the geopolitical landscape of tomorrow. This is what President Wilson understood. Safety and prosperity for all nations can only be won through unified and cooperative effort. President Wilson understands that peace and security are more than just words. They require constant work and action on the part of nations coming together for a common purpose. The Ukraine Defense Contact Group is committed to that work. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Our first question will go to Associated Press, Tarkov.
Thank you for doing this. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to ask you about Iran. Does the Pentagon have any indication that the helicopter crash in Iran that killed President Raisi was anything other than an accident? And have you directed any force posture changes in case there's unrest following these deaths? And then for Chairman Brown, I wanted to ask you about Senior Airman Roger Fortson. What would you like to say to Fortson's family? And more broadly, what would you like to say to Black service members who are wondering if it matters whether they serve? No matter what they do, there's still law enforcement that see them as a threat.
Thanks, Tara. Regarding the death of Iran's president in the very unfortunate helicopter crash. We continue to monitor the situation, but we don't have any insights into the cause of the accident at this point. And certainly, I know the Iranians are investigating or will investigate, and so we'll see what the outcome is once their investigation is complete. In terms of our force posture, I don't have any announcements to make, and again, this is something that we'll continue to watch, and I don't necessarily see any broader regional security impacts at this point in time, Tara.
But at this time, you have no indication that there was anything other than an accident that brought this helicopter down?
Right. I can't speculate on what may have been the cause of the accident, Tara, but you know, again, I think we'll learn more once the Iranians have investigated.
Tara, let me first of all pass on my sincere condolences to Chairman Fortson's family, friends, and fellow airmen. I know they're going through some difficult times right now. And I will also tell you that, for every service member we lose, it always tears on me because I know it impacts the family. The one thing I would highlight, this is under an investigation, but what I would highlight is that a number of our service members and their families live in our various communities around the country. And we would hope and expect that they would all be able to be safe in those communities and safe in their homes. At the same time, I would also highlight that for each one of those young people that join our service and raise their right hand and take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, we want to provide them opportunities to reach their full potential. And that's our focus for no matter their background that decide to join our force.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question, go to CNN.
Secretary Austin, sir, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant briefed National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Rafa plans and humanitarian efforts. At least according to the readout, it seems it's more detailed. Have you seen the plans that Sullivan was briefed on, and does it meet the requirements of what you want to see in terms of what Israel needs to do before an operation in Rafa? And then General Brown, sir, as Ukraine tries to defend itself against a renewed Russian offensive in Kyiv, do you believe Ukraine should be able to use American weaponry to target Russian forces that are just right across the border there? Is that a recommendation you would make?
Thanks. I've not seen the information that was briefed to Mr. Sullivan, but as you know, I talk to Minister Gallant every week, and I would expect that he would detail the information in that briefing to me as well. So, and I'll talk to Jake Sullivan as soon as he's available. But because of that, I won't speculate as to whether or not it meets any kind of requirements. But again, we've been clear about what we think is very, very important, and that is to make sure that the civilians that are in that battle space are moved out of the battle space before any activity occurs in that city. So we'll see what happens. So.
Our focus in the support of Ukraine is being able to use capabilities, particularly the things that will impact the close battle in various areas. And we're paying attention to what's going on in and around Kyiv. I won't publicly talk about what I might advise, but as we continue to support them, I'll continue to work with the Secretary as we make our recommendations going forward. But the real key point is using the capabilities that we provided them in the close battle in the areas that they are doing on the fronts that they're already operating on, as well as into Crimea.
Okay, let's go to Washington Post.
Hi, nice to see you all. This question's for both of you regarding going back to the Rafa operation and following up on Oren's question. So the IDF is announcing plans as recently as today to expand the Rafa operation. And meanwhile, people that we've spoken with on the ground say that that they perceive what is already a full-fledged operation, at least that's the perception on the ground. Given the Biden administration's statement that it will not support a full-fledged invasion of Rafa without a coherent evacuation and humanitarian plan, are you prepared to declare that it's a full-fledged invasion if these actions go ahead? And do you think there's a danger that the IDF could sort of just do this gradually, continue to make sort of gradual expansions and incremental push into Rafa in a way that falls short of a giant charge into the city and potentially try to avoid the U.S. consequences that have been threatened? Thank
Yeah, again, I've seen what was reported that Minister Gallant said. I look forward to talking to him about what his plans really are, and also talking with Jake Sullivan as well. And I really don't want to speculate as to whether or not this is or is not or will be a larger operation. I really would like to see what they intend to do. But what we would like to see, again, is protection of those civilians that are in the battle space. Move those civilians out, but not only move them out, but make sure that wherever they go, wherever you move them to, that you have provisions for them to take care of them, water, shelter, those types of things. And I've said before that in my view, there have been far too many casualties, civilian casualties, in this fight. We need to see something done a lot differently. And even if there are if there is kinetic activity, if there is an operation that is conducted that's larger, we certainly would like to see things done differently, more precise, and less destruction of the civilian structures and more protection of the civilian population.
Well, I would echo, very much what the Secretary said, and in all my conversations with my counterpart, it's very much the same. Be able to communicate with us what their intent is, so we understand how they're approaching it, but at the same time being able to take care of the civilians, and not just move them out, but move them into places where they can have shelter, have food, and that's something we continually message in the engagements I have with my counterpart.
Let's go to Fox.
Secretary Austin, Victoria Nuland, the former acting Deputy Secretary of State who just stepped down, said yesterday on the Sunday shows that the administration needs a new Ukraine strategy, and she said, quote, "I think if the attacks are coming directly from over the line in Russia, that those bases ought to be fair game. I think it's time to give the Ukrainians more help hitting these bases inside Russia." Do you agree with her assessment?
I agree with what the chairman just said, Jennifer, and that is that, in my view, their focus ought to be on the close fight and making sure that they're servicing those targets that will enable success in the close fight. So, we've been that way throughout, and that'll be my view going forward. So.
And General Brown, is there anything NATO can do to help Georgia resist Russian efforts to expand their influence? How does this affect what's happening in Georgia right now? How does it affect Georgia's pathway to NATO?
Well, we're deeply concerned in watching the influence Russia has in Georgia, and we'll remain committed to Georgia's sovereignty. As I met last week with my NATO counterparts, we consistently talk about how we work together to the sovereignty of the nations that are part of NATO, but also just the overall security situation in Europe.
But will this affect Georgia's admission to NATO or pathway to NATO? Should they be made? I'm
not in the policy making decision points of whether or not. But from my perspective as a uniformed service member, it's about ensuring the security of the various nations, but also the security of the citizens of those nations as well.
Okay, let's go to Al Jazeera.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The International Criminal Court prosecutor today announced he's requesting arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and of Israel and your counterpart, Mr. Gallant, over accusation of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. My first question, will your administration support this case, and will you cooperate with the court on this case? And the second question is, the U.S. being the main supporter of Israel, and in light of this case, will you reconsider the provision of weapons to Israel, some of which have been used to kill Palestinian civilians, according to President Biden? Thank you.
So I've seen press reports of the ICC seeking arrest warrants, but I don't have anything to provide on that issue. Again, our focus continues to be on providing Israel what it needs to defend itself. We've That's been our focus from the very beginning, and as President Biden has said a number of times, our support to Israel remains ironclad. I think it's important to reflect back to how this got started. You know, this brutal attack on October 7th, you know, a number of Israeli and American civilians were killed in that assault, in that terrorist attack. There were over 230 hostages taken. Half of those hostages remain in custody. And so, you know, again, our focus remains on providing support to Israel in its efforts to defend itself. And we very much would like to see the hostages returned safely. And in terms of the decision to provide weapons to Israel, again, I won't engage in any type of speculation going forward. But again, my hope would be that you know, we do what's necessary to protect civilians in the battle space, and you know, you'll hear me say that over and over again. I don't think the two things are incompatible. You know, I think you can conduct military operations effectively and also account for civilians in the battle space. You know, we have learned a lot. The United States has learned a lot in terms of, you know, this type of operation over the past several years, and again, there are ways to do this where you can account for both. You can protect the people and also accomplish your objectives.
Let's go to Reuters.
General Brown, could you explain, you've been quoted talking about the inevitability of advisors, U.S. advisors in Ukraine, working with Ukrainian forces. Can you explain a little bit about why that is necessary and what it would take to make that happen? And Secretary Austin, on the ICC, President Biden has called it, the arrest warrants, outrageous. This department had said it would work with the ICC to provide evidence about Ukraine. Is that work continuing? How does this decision affect those Pentagon efforts? Thank you.
So let me put you know, that discussion into context. If you go back before February of 2022, we had our U.S. military members in there while working and training with the Ukrainians, and that's not the case right now. And you know, when I said that we would be able to do that eventually, you know, once this conflict is over and we're in a better place, then I would suspect we would be able to bring trainers back in. But right now, there are no plans to bring U.S. trainers into Ukraine.
So on the question of the ICC, again, as I said earlier, I don't have anything to add on the reports that we've seen here recently. Regarding the question of whether or not we'll continue to provide support to the ICC with respect to crimes that are committed in Ukraine, yes, we continue that work.
Time for just a couple more. Let's go to NPR.
Mr. Secretary, I wanted to go back to Rafa. You said you haven't received a detailed military plan from the Israelis about the way ahead there. What about the humanitarian plan? You say you want them to care for these hundreds of thousands of people displaced, provide food, shelter, medical care. Have they given you any indication about how they plan on doing that?
Early on, we received a conceptual brief on how they were going to put measures in place to take care of the population that moved out of that battle space, and the things that are required to support that plan. We've just not seen. I've not seen those elements go into play, and so my view is that there's more work to be done, and my view is also that this takes time, and so. Again, those things that I think need to be in place to take care of people whenever they migrate from one place to another. Again, I've not seen evidence that those things are in place yet. So.
Well, can you give us a sense of the concept that they gave you? Any details on that to us?
I'll leave that to the Israelis to brief their concept. But yeah, it's one thing to have a concept. It's another thing to actually put it into play. So.
Let's go to NBC.
Mr. Secretary, you said that it is possible to conduct operations and also account for civilians in the battle space. And I wonder, on Rafa, given your extensive military experience, what you're seeing happen in Rafa right now, do you think that Israel is doing that, conducting their operations and accounting for civilians in the battle space. And then, Mr. Chairman, on the idea of Ukraine conducting strikes inside Russia, I wonder if you can say, are you confident that none of the long-range ATACMS that the U.S. has provided have been used to strike inside Russian territory?
So regarding what Israel's doing inside Rafa, what we've seen thus far is a limited action that's been focused on the Rafa border crossing. Again, it's reported that Minister Gallant said that he looks to expand operations going forward. Now, I look forward to having that discussion with him to understand, what his intent is and how he's going to do that. But again, what we want to see is civilians accounted for and moved out of that battle space before anything happens. We've been clear about that throughout. As you well know, I think before this fight kicked off in Gaza, there were some 275,000 or so people that lived in and around Rafa. That number grew to 1.25 million or so, and that's a big jump, and that's a lot of people in a very compressed battle space. That's in a very difficult urban area, and as you know, urban combat is very, very intense, very difficult to begin with. So unless you account for those civilians and do things differently, then I think you stand to have a lot more casualties going forward, and that's something that we'd like to see change. Yeah.
Let's go to Scripps.
Yeah, I am confident the ATACMS that we provided have not been used in Russia. They've been used in targets in Ukraine.
Secretary Austin, the Russians, they're flying bombers in Russian territory with glide bombs that are having a devastating impact on the battlefield inside of Ukraine. Should the Ukrainians be able to use American air defenses to hit those Russian bombers in Russian territory?
Well, again, you can diagram a number of different cases for, whatever. I would say that we have been clear about providing Ukraine the ability to defend its sovereign territory. And again, the dynamics of an aerial engagement, I leave it up to the experts, but certainly, our expectation is that they continue to use the weapons that we provided on targets inside of Ukraine. Now, the aerial dynamics a little bit different, and so, but again, don't want to speculate on any one or any type of engagement here at the podium. So,
it's off limits or not off limits?
So, final question. We'll go over here.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, are you concerned that Iran is going to try and blame Israel or even the United States for the crash that killed the president yesterday? And for General Brown, Israel is also conducting operations in northern Gaza, even though they've said that they previously said that they had defeated Hamas there. So, particularly given your personal experience fighting terrorists in the Middle East, do you believe that Israel can achieve its goal of fully eliminating Hamas?
The United States had no part to play in that crash, and that's a fact, plain and simple. So.
And Israel? Are you afraid they're going to blame Israel?
I won't speculate as to what they'll blame. Again, they have to conduct an investigation to see what the cause of the crash was. It could be a number of things: mechanical failure, pilot error, you name it. So.
To your question about northern Gaza, and based on experience, not only do you have to actually go in and clear out whatever adversary you're up against, you have to go in and hold the territory, then you got to stabilize it. The Israelis did not actually, once they cleared it, didn't hold, and so that allows your adversary then to repopulate in areas if you're not there. And so that does make it more challenging for them as far as being able to meet their objective of being able to militarily destroy and defeat Hamas.
Do you think they will be able to do that?
Well, I mean, Hamas it's not just an organization; it's a ideology, and so you got to think about the overall piece of being able to provide security not only for Israel but just there in the region is going to take a concerted effort, not just from a military piece, but it's also how we work the humanitarian assistance, which is why we focus so much. Secretary and I talking about humanitarian assistance and protecting the civilians that are there in Gaza.
Secretary Austin, General Brown, thank you very much, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our press briefing. Thank you.
Thanks.